about to join Don Neuen, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio, and Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience, for a weekly situation report, or SITREP. 18 hours a day, Denise Simon lives her life as an Intel Analyst. 18 hours a day, Don Neuen lives his life in the world of rock and roll. 1 hour each day, Neuen receives a daily SITREP from Simon. Welcome to the Drive Time Situation Report. Fasten your seatbelt. You're now in Don Neuen's car, and he is calling in for his SITREP.
Smello.
Hey, what's up, Denise? Calling in for tonight's SITREP. But tonight's the special night of the week because, you know, we've got a bunch of people riding home with me. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to tonight's Drive Time Situation Report, a radio show unlike any other that you'll ever listen to, I think, because Denise Simon is on one end of this conversation. My name is Don Neuen, and I'm on the other end of it. I'm in my car driving home from a long day at work, and I'm doing what I do every night on the way home. I give Denise Simon a call so I can get a situation report on what has happened throughout the day, because Denise has at times, I guess it's a luxury, Denise, that you are able to spend your day in the world as an intelligence analyst. Now, I'm sure, I know that there are times when that's extremely frustrating, more probably often than not. But I, on the other hand, spend my day in the world of rock and roll. And as a result, I don't get a chance to read much news. I don't get the chance to watch TV, go into social media. So I count on my dear friend Denise Simon to give me a recap of what's happening in the world. Now, we're bringing you along for this ride. And anything can happen. Denise, the last couple of weeks we've had some, internet issues and connectivity issues. But again, I'm in my car. I'm talking to you on an iPhone. Denise is about 500 miles away from me in Central Florida, talking to you from her bunker. And we just want you to be able to benefit and experience one night a week what I get 5 nights a week. So, Denise, having said all that, why don't we timestamp this show so everybody knows exactly what's going on, and let's get after it.
It is Alabama election night, 8:25 p.m. Eastern, 12/12, year of our Lord 2017.
There you go. And for all the liberals that are listening that have no idea what Denise just said, it's December 12th. 2017. So, all right, Denise, I'll tell you what, I think you and I agree that we will be very elated when tonight is over.
Oy vey. But I'll tell you an interesting thing. The Democrats, if Roy Moore wins, the Democrats are going to go for wild abandon to destroy the Republican Party and the Trump White House.
I thought they were already doing that.
No, I don't think they've even begun. I think we had that little Nancy Pelosi, George Soros kind of meeting out in California at that resort about a month ago, where they're plotting things out. It's not just a one-off. They're plotting. Now,
so you think that if Doug Jones wins, it's going to give them an injection of Viagra, and they're going to be going nuts?
Yes, and if the Republicans are smart, if Doug Jones wins, then they need to turn around and take another look at Senator Menendez, New Jersey, because remember, he was what? I don't remember what the case, what the decision was. It was either a mistrial or he was innocent on his charges of corruption with his friend, the friendly doctor down there in the Caribbean somewhere. But the one thing that didn't get brought up in that trial at all were all the young girls and the prostitutes that were flown back and forth, an exact, I would say, replica of the Lolita Express of Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Clinton fame. So I would just say, I'm just casting a little bit of caution to the wind, that if Doug Jones wins, in order to, keep some kind of an edge in the power of the Senate, they're going to have to go after Menendez. And interestingly enough, there was some moment of chatter where McConnell was going to bring him before the Ethics Committee. I haven't heard anything about that since. If Roy Moore wins, then we automatically know that that's going before the Ethics Committee. But I will tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, going before an Ethics Committee is where scandals go to die. It means nothing. There is no punishment. There is no consequence. It's a gesture that can be used politically, but it doesn't mean that, somebody's going to be thrown out of office, or, they can necessarily vote somebody out, or, have them removed in some other way, but that doesn't come out of the Ethics Committee.
Well, let me ask you this about this Ethics Committee. Let's take, for example, an individual that runs for Senate who successfully hides and conceals from the voters the fact that he had committed a murder prior to, and this is a real stretch, Denise. I'm intending it for it to be, but let's say that he hides the fact that he is a convicted felon. Let's limit it to being a convicted felon prior to him being elected, and that if the voters would have known that he in fact was a convicted felon, that may have influenced their way to vote. Let's take that scenario as one thing that would go against this Ethics Committee. The second scenario would be that if he had committed something after being elected. Now, in my opinion, that is the only thing that an ethics committee should weigh in on, unless there was any type of a fraudulent representation in which the voters didn't have any idea that they were voting for the man they actually were voting for. None of which applies to Roy Moore. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, based on that, what good would the Senate Ethics Committee be, and what role would they play if, in fact, Moore is victorious tonight?
Really, again, it's a gesture. The Ethics Committee means flipping nothing. There's a list of don'ts. Don't do this and don't do that. But if you do it, then we get to kind of look at it and see if you really did do it, and maybe we can give you a waiver, or maybe we can, go, well, I see how that kind of panned out. So you really didn't kind of, you know what I'm saying? It's a place where excuses are made and accepted.
Yeah, well.
Now, here's the interesting thing when it comes to.
Sadly, the name of that committee is ethics.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if the Washington Post can do what they did to Roy Moore, digging up, a handful of women from 38 years ago, right, wrong, or indifferent, whether that all happened, we don't know. But the fact is, it rang a bell 38 years ago, and the guy's run for public office many times since then, and has held public office many times since then, but it didn't seem to matter, didn't seem to be an issue. Then I would say that that same ploy could be applied to Senator Menendez. We can go look at all those flight logs. We can go grab whatever we can and go, find those women and have them give us some testimony. Maybe they'll come up with a yearbook. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if they want to fight,
Gloria Allred will represent them as well.
Yeah. If they want to fight fire with fire, then bring it on.
Well, yeah, but you know what the problem that you and I have talked about countless times? The Republicans don't fight fire with fire.
No, because they're too busy trying to do some kind of a job. And then we sit around here and go, well, they suck at, they're doing their job too. So they just suck all together. And so everybody buys into everything that Steve Bannon's saying.
Well, I think a lot of them do suck, and I don't necessarily buy into what Steve Bannon says. But that's for a different episode of the Drive Time Situation Report. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the big show. Denise, I'm driving through the hood. How about that?
All righty then.
But I am armed and I am observant. I'm looking around me, looking for strange activity as I drive through the hood in Atlanta. And while I'm being observant, I am armed.
Okay, good.
Hey, guess what? Today was Chris Blaney of Chris X Radio's birthday.
Oh, all right.
I think he's 50. I think he's 50.
A young buck, huh?
Yeah. All right, so what else is happening, Nisi?
Well, interestingly enough, the official charges for our little snot-nosed Akayed Ullah were officially filed
the subway bomber, right?
Yeah, the one that was the failed
the firecracker bomber.
He so failed at it that even Islamic State really didn't take any credit for him.
What a schmuck.
Well, maybe so, but it is a very serious situation here, because he could have been successful, and then we would have had a real problem. He could have blown up an entire, train car.
Do you know what size weapon of mass destruction that he had attached to him?
I'm going to get to that, so hang here with me.
Copy that.
The criminal complaint was written up by Joseph Sariello, who is a special agent with the Department of Homeland Security Investigations, and a member of the FBI New York Joint Terrorism Task Force. Okay, so he's the one that wrote up the criminal complaint. And what is particularly interesting, because we come to think that that the FBI is giving a pass to they don't understand the Muslim Brotherhood and they're not getting into the caliphate and all this other kind of stuff. I'm here to tell you that's really wrong. Because I found it very interesting that they literally spoke to his attempt to use a weapon of mass destruction, which was identified as use a weapon of mass destruction affecting interstate and foreign commerce. Perpetrator traveled in interstate and foreign commerce in furtherance of his offense. He did knowingly and unlawfully deliver, place, discharge, and detonate an explosive and another lethal device into, and against a place of public use. I'm going down here because he certainly wanted to affect bodily injury and or death, cause major economic loss, all those kinds of things. So you understand how they do these counts. Let's see.
Isn't it amazing, though? Isn't it amazing that they just can't say, we've got another radicalized idiot that attempted to kill innocent people in the name of Allah.
Well,
and that just not be good enough.
Because you have the way laws are written, and you have to do the counts according to that. But this guy, he's kind of interesting because he actually background on Islamic State, and he says, based on my training experience and review of publicly available materials. So he speaks about 2004. about AQI, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, then known as Jamaat al-Tawad, Wallah Jihad, a foreign terrorist organization. He refers to the executive order under the Bush administration. He refers to Islamic State. He refers to a foreign terrorist organization, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, Ad-Dawlah al-Islamiyah, Al-Furqan Establishment for Media Productions. He goes through the whole thing here. So it is good because he's actually talking about international law, indiscriminate killing, deliberate targeting of civilians, mass destruction, extrajudicial killings, persecution of individuals, and talking about other things, including forced displacement of Shia communities and minority groups, killing and maiming of children, rape, and other forms of sexual violence. According to the State Department, Islamic State has recruited thousands of foreign fighters to expand its so-called caliphate in Iraq, Syria, and other locations in Africa and the Middle East, and has leveraged the technology to spread its violent extremist ideology for the incitements to commit terrorist act. So it's a long way of saying what you just said if you put it down into one sentence. But the interesting thing is they obviously know what a caliphate is. They know what Sharia is and Shia law, Sharia law. So I was very happy to see that. They talk about a kafir, which is obviously an infidel. They talk about not being able to make the hijrah, so don't sit at home and give up, ignite a bomb, stab a kafir, which is the infidel. So they are talking about all the recruiting materials and the propaganda on social media, interacting with other Islamic State organizations. The Arabic terms meaning disbelievers, the hijra, or Arabic term normally used for the refer to migration. You see what I'm saying? So they have all of that, and that is a very good thing. Now, what did he have? Okay, well, he had a 9-volt battery inside his pants pocket. He had wires connected to the battery running underneath his jacket. He had 2 plastic zip ties underneath his jacket. He had several fragments of a metal pipe, including pieces of an end metal end cap on the ground, the remnants of what appeared to be Christmas tree light bulbs attached to the wires, wire and wire connectors, metal screws, and pieces of what appeared to be zip ties. Now, that's what they saw when they got there. Do you understand what I'm saying? That was the remnants that they got of the evidence.
Right.
They also had the exact same video footage that I actually got, so they used that very same thing too, of when you had all those people walking towards the camera and then the explosion went off in the background. They did go to his house. They did find an awful lot of other things too. And fascinatingly enough, he waived his Miranda rights both verbally and in writing. So, he is not under any kind of protection. He built the pipe bomb at the residence about a week ago. He began compiling the materials that he used to construct the pipe about 2 to 3 weeks ago. The pipe bomb was comprised of a metal pipe, which he filled with explosive materials that he created. Obviously, he used Christmas tree lights, wiring, and 9-volt battery as a detonation. He filled the pipe with metal screws, and then the zip ties. Now, he began to...
Do we have any idea how big the pipe was? And was there more than one?
There was only one, and it was about a foot that I'm told.
What did he use for the explosive device?
It doesn't say. Whatever it is that he manufactured, he made it.
I wonder if when the initial explosion took place and it clearly knocked him to the ground.
7:19 a.m.
Yeah, if he realized that there weren't 72 virgins waiting for him.
Cute. I'm thinking that based on how I saw him immediately after that, I think it knocked him unconscious for a minute or two for sure. I mean, he was out
Yeah,
cold.
but when he came to, he had to be disappointed.
Well, I think he is, but I think he's actually more defiant than anything.
Well, I'm making fun of him because he's such a schmuck.
I know you are.
Okay. I want to make sure any liberal listeners get that too. Okay, back to you, Denise. Sorry.
All right. So this was actually signed. The criminal complaint was signed today in the Southern District of New York by the magistrate judge. Now he already has a lawyer that has knocked on or tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hey, you know, we're going to help you out here, and we're going to kind of guide you through this." And the lawyer is from CARE, a Council on Islamic American Relations. And he had obviously become very radicalized going back as far as 2014. He is still in the hospital. He's going to appear before the judge apparently tomorrow, but they're going to do it with a video conference remotely because they're not leaving. He's not leaving the hospital. So that's the
Very
poop on
interesting.
that's the poop on him.
Yeah. So there is no chance, like you and I were talking about last night, where they would send him down to Gitmo.
Nah, doesn't look like it.
If he's convicted of all of these charges, the state of New York does what? Supports him with taxpayer dollars for the rest of his natural life?
I don't think he'll get life. I think he might get 25 or 30 years, but I don't think he'll get life.
You got to be kidding me.
No, he didn't kill anybody.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, let's let him off then easy.
Yeah. Now, here's the other interesting thing. I don't think he's an American citizen yet. He may have applied or he may not have, and he may still be operating on an F4 green card. Now, the bigger question is, what are they finding at all the other locations with his extended family members that he's here with that sponsored him to come here 7 years ago? What do we do about what their positions are? Because apparently the parents are slamming the New York Police Department 6 ways from Sunday, which I think came, interestingly enough, from the CARE lawyer.
Well, you know, outside of somebody like Gloria Allred, CARE is the only organization that I can think of that would have representation that would even remotely accept this guy.
Mm-hmm. Well, he is married. He is married and does have a son in Bangladesh. Now the question is,
his wife is too? Is his wife in Bangladesh too?
Yeah, the wife and the son are in Bangladesh.
Okay.
He married them. I mean, he married her about just about a year or so ago.
What this guy do for a living? Do we know?
He worked as an electrician after he was quasi-fired from being a livery driver, like a private driver, a cab driver kind of guy. They would not renew his license, which tells me he was a schmuck to all of his passengers. And that goes along...
Schmuck. Isn't that a great word?
Mm-hmm. But that actually goes along with some of the businesses that were around his house that, you know, where he would go in and buy stuff and whatnot. Some of these shop owners said he was the very same thing. You know, he would move his car.
And what was that? And what was that, Denise? What did they say he was?
Oh, they didn't say he was a schmuck. They just said he was arrogant and whatnot. I'm calling him a schmuck.
And you're doing it well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Speaking of schmucks, any further developments with Al Franken and John Conyers?
No.
What's going on with Trent Franks? Is he going to have
gone.
some serious trouble? He quit? He resigned?
He was going to resign effective at the end of the year. But when his wife went into the hospital last Friday, he made it effective that day.
Gotcha. And how about the goober lips from Texas? Farfennugan or whatever his name is.
Nobody's really talking about Blake Farenthold.
Farfennugan. You like that?
That's cute.
It's the only thing that could come to mind.
That's cute.
Little chubby boy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we don't know anything about him. No developments with Franken and Conyers.
No.
You know, you and I talked a couple of SITREPs ago about Seoul, South Korea, the Winter Olympics, and kind of the effect that has on, you know, the United States taking any type of action at this point against the Kim regime. You got any other thoughts on that? Anything happened in the last, because we haven't talked about that for about a week.
Well, apparently there are still some talks going on with on the diplomatic side with some kind of a envoy. Now, where that's necessarily going, nobody is talking about. But we are doing some missile tracking testing, and we have another whole team that is doing some very serious, very wide and in-depth training for security reasons and intelligence reasons for the Olympics. As if everything's going to go smoothly and it's going to continue and all the athletes are going to show up except the Russians. They're doing all of that work now, which they would necessarily have to do because they were doing it at least that long when the Olympics were in Brazil.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Tell me what kind of defense South Korea, or for that matter, any of her allies, could put up against an onslaught of bio or chemical weapons that would be launched from North Korea into South Korea during the Olympics. I mean, the reality is he could shoot off enough of those to where it would be catastrophic, and there's not a whole lot anybody could do about it. Am I correct?
Well, sort of. We are watching every part of North Korea so we can tell you what the breed of the dog is that just crossed the street. So if we see any particular movement of any kind of hostile assets that would include a chemical or biological weapon, I would pretty much assure you going into the Olympics that we would take preemptive action and knock them out.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Because from what I understand, and based on conversations you and I have had, those things are loaded and aimed at this point.
I don't know about loaded and aimed. I think that that's probably something that could be done within hours to do that. But we do have some air sniffers over there that are doing, they're taking some air samples. It's not only United States equipment, but it's some allied equipment that's over there as well. Like Japan, I think, is also doing it. And we are taking air samples and seeing if there's any kind of residual chemicals or compounds that are in the air quality that would give us some clues that there is some chemical or biological activity.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, let me bring you up to speed if you're tuning in late. You're listening to the Drive Time SITREP with Denise Simon, and my name is Don Neuen. I am in my car driving home. I'm doing approximately 70 miles an hour, Denise, on Interstate 20, headed west out to West Georgia. We're bringing you guys along for the ride. This is a SITREP that I get every night of the week from Denise. It's a recap of what happened throughout the day, cutting all of the fat away from things. She just lets me know what she feels I need to know, and I trust her unconditionally. You can too.
Thank you.
And I
Thank
would
you.
suggest that you check out her website, founderscode.com, founderscode.com. She, on average, will post any place from 4 to 8 articles a day. If you sign up for her daily posting newsletter, you end up getting all those sent to you in your email. You can keep them and you can read them whenever you got the time. But the point is, if you do that, you're going to be way ahead of the curve. Denise Simon, as far as I know, is the only person that completely vets everything that she actually clicks post. And how is that beneficial to you? It gives you credibility. So you can read and study Denise's articles with full confidence, A, that she is rarely ever wrong, B, that she's usually weeks, months, and even years ahead of what's going on, and C, that you can talk about it after you read it, and you will have credibility because she has done all the work in vetting the information for you. So founderscode.com, I encourage you to check it out. Denise, what else we got?
Well, as a caveat to that, and thank you for saying that, I try very hard to also give you much more detail of the story or the event or the scandal or the issue such that it's in more context, because when we hear things on the news coming out of MSNBC or CNN or even Fox, we only get 60, 90, 120 seconds of it, and we don't hear the whole thing. And I try very hard to go back and give some background and those kinds of things, which is kind of where I want to go next, because James Clapper, the former head of DNI, and Mike Morrell, who was the deputy director of the CIA many times, and he was there and briefed George Bush many times during his presidency and did the same for the Obama administration. Well, I'm not a big fan of either, but I have to take the time to listen to them because they are the closest to the intelligence such that we will never get. And yesterday, Zero Hedge came out with one kind of snippet, and I don't have much regard for Zero Hedge. But on the other hand, Politico came out with an interview that they had done with Mike Morrell, and it's a long interview because my post is almost 8,000 words, and it's actually a fascinating interview because, again, I don't have a lot of regard for either of these two fellas, especially now since James Clapper, he was always in a very subservient position under the Obama administration, but nonetheless, the guy had been around, 40 years or something in the intelligence world, and he was essentially a counterpart in a different agency with Mike Morrell, as he was operating as the deputy director of the CIA. Well, Mike Morrell came out pretty early on and said that he was going all in for Hillary. I don't know what Clapper's position was, but it almost, whatever it is, I think it was something other than Donald Trump, as we have heard him speak on CNN often, because he's a contributor.
Exactly.
All right, but it's important for us not to have only listen to the people that say things that we want to hear. It's important for us to listen to the things that we also don't want to hear. But this interview was actually quite fascinating, Don, because Politico also reported a couple of months ago that the former Obama administration and Obama himself, along with Susan Rice and some others in his National Security Council, actually admitted that they had made a colossal mistake on not taking action with Russian interference. They were actually warned in 2014 about Russian interference. In 2014, this goes certainly way before the campaign season. I imagine those warnings actually came from probably NSA and not CIA. The New York Times, of all publications, actually did a pretty solid report on how the Obama White House substantially delayed any kind of response to Russia. Remember, all of the chatter about hacking into the DNC and the DCCC and all the other things that were going on, but yet Obama didn't take any action until December the 29th, when he threw out several Russians, diplomats from the United States, and closed 3 of their facilities.
All right, hold on a second. Hold on. Think back to answer this question. What year did you start writing about Russian meddling, Russia creating chaos, Russian fingers in the pie, stirring up the pot? Because you and I have been talking about that for a long
It wasn't in 2014. I started paying some other kinds of attention in 2015. And I started to reach out to some people that were, more subject matter experts on Russia than I had ever been. And I'm clearly not one now, but I have come to read an awful lot of former Soviet and Russian leader doctrine, and I have listened to an awful lot of testimonies and hearings given before several committees in Congress, and they're absolutely fascinating. And then I watched how the top people at Twitter, Facebook had to go before the same committees and cough up some things there. I do know that some of their testimonies was done behind closed doors as well. We watched the intrusion of Russia in Crimea and Ukraine, certainly into Eastern Europe, including the Baltics, Poland. Then we saw it was happening in Germany. Then we saw it was happening in France. Then we saw it was happening in the UK, especially the fact that an awful lot of Russian activities, which is known as active measures, by the way, had created all of these fake accounts on social media that actually pushed for Brexit to happen. Why? Because it would cause chaos. So it would eventually break up the European Union. Now, the European Union are allies of the United States, but Russia needs those respective countries, to be subservient to Russia because Russia sells them oil. Anyway, Mike Morrell decided that he was going to go back and listen to some testimonies. He was going to go back and review once again. Now, he's been out of CIA since Obama left, but he was going to really go back and listen to all the things and reread all the things that he felt like he needed to review to see what they missed when it came to Russia. And he's actually admitting that they missed it. And that's what's particularly interesting, because they were more concerned about tanks, about terror, Islamic State, Afghanistan, Sudan, all these other places, but they weren't paying, and even Russia, but they weren't paying attention to all things that Russia was doing. And so he at one point actually reached out to James Clapper and said, hey, you and I need to have a serious conversation here. Did you miss this too when it came to the hybrid warfare component of Russia, the hacking component of Russia? And Clapper admitted it, but he wasn't quite as introspective about it as Mike Morrell was. The other fascinating thing is that Mike Morrell actually came out and said that he made a mistake and that he shouldn't have gone all in for Hillary. He should have actually remained neutral, because he would have probably seen things very differently. Now, that's a significant admission. Because, this guy was a superstar as a CIA analyst for years. The other fascinating thing is that, he worked for a Republican president and then he worked for a Democrat president. And so now this fellow has admitted some big, huge mistakes. And where the Obama administration had been warned about Russia, they weren't warned by CIA. Now, maybe that's the CIA necessarily knew some of these things, but when it reached Mike Morell's desk, it was stripped out. Do you see what I'm saying? Because that clearly does happen. But he's also.
Let me ask you. Go ahead. I've got a question when you're done.
He also has actually taken another look at Donald Trump. And he is clearly not as critical of Donald Trump as we would expect him to be. As a matter of fact, he is thinking that Donald Trump may be quite right when it comes to the people in the intelligence community, because he actually says in here, in his interview, in his remarks, how is this, with these things that are being missed, how is it that Donald Trump really sees the intelligence community? Could he actually be right? Because he's our customer. And if he actually is looking back and saying, well, Russia did this, and, North Korea did this, or Iran did this, were all of those things getting packaged up and being told to his customer, the president, not only at Obama level, but at the Trump level? So it's really quite a fascinating interview. I would say that he's actually talking about a intelligence failure when it comes to the cyber Pearl Harbor that even Leon Panetta, who I don't have much respect for either, that he warned about. And he warned about it to Obama, but he didn't obviously work for Trump. So the DNI, Clapper in this case, puts out something called the National Intelligence Report. And what was going on with the cyber warfare or the social media warfare, the active measures warfare that Russia was doing, was not put in those national intelligence estimates. It seemed to all come from NSA and went over to piece parts of the FBI and over to the Department of Homeland Security. And that's where it really was manifesting. But then
right,
Obama didn't.
Hang on a second.
Obama didn't do anything about it.
All right. You answered my question to a great extent, and that was, how does Trump benefit from this? Because as you and I have spoken about, you did not vote for Donald Trump. I did for my own reasons, which were simply to defeat liberalism. But both of us agree that we want Donald Trump to succeed, and the United States desperately needs him to succeed. So I was hoping that there would be a little bit of a silver lining to the cloud that you were talking about there with regard to how Trump can benefit. Now, has he used this as a positive tool?
Well, one is you didn't complete the sentence, because it makes it sound like something you said, that I didn't vote for Donald Trump, that I voted for Hillary, and I take exception to that because I didn't vote for Hillary. I wrote in Ted Cruz. Okay.
There you go. Okay.
The
Sorry
other
about
piece.
That. I assumed all the listeners already knew that because we've talked about it so many times. My bad.
The other piece of this is that the bigger challenge is, I guarantee you, the people that are sitting in the existing positions now at DNI and at CIA, and even maybe Christopher Wray at FBI, although the jury is out in my book on him, that they're taking a very hard look at what Mike Morell and James Clapper necessarily had to say in this Politico piece. It's a profound article. It is a profound interview. And I think that whatever is going to Trump daily in his presidential daily briefings are probably much more in your face, accurate today than they clearly were under the Obama administration. Because remember, Obama didn't take most of his presidential daily briefings to start with. He took less than half. And the second thing is that he was very dismissive of an awful lot of things that were in there. Trump being somewhat of a newbie and having newbies in these other roles within the intelligence community, I think he's getting a lot more benefit of the doubt, and I think he's being schooled on some things, because yet another interesting thing happened today, or at least it was reported today, and that is our little friend H.R. McMaster. Now, a lot of people, it was becoming very popular here a couple of months ago for people to not like H.R. McMaster, because a lot of people were using him as the source of the leaks that were coming out of the White House. Well, it was reported today by Olivier Knox, who is a chief Washington correspondent. Who she really works for, I don't know. But H.R. McMaster has officially accused Russia, as of today, Tuesday, the 12th, of waging campaigns of subversion against the United States and its allies. And that McMaster, along with Trump, are going to be unveiling their national security strategy on December the 18th. McMaster's comments about Moscow amounted to unusually sharp criticism about Russia and Vladimir Putin, that he wants better relationships with them, but now the conditions of that relationship will necessarily change because they're in a new generation of warfare, which goes back to really what Mike Morrell was certainly trying to impart in his long interview. McMaster has spoken about the sophisticated of the campaigns of this subversion, which includes disinformation, propaganda, cyber tools, maintaining multiple domains, dividing our committees and our nations and our allies, and trying to put allies against the United States. You see where all that was going? He actually gave this talk in conjunction with the Brits at an organization called the Policy Exchange, which is a think tank. I don't know anything about it. But McMaster also essentially had the same kind of words for China, although those were a little bit different, because he added the economic aggressions that China had been imposing. So now, my words when I said that Trump is getting some benefits here, where whatever Obama passed off to Trump probably was, 0.1% of what should have been passed off. It appears that McMaster is learning and Trump is in fact learning. And now we have a very different paradigm when it comes to Russia, when it comes to China, and I would also argue when it comes to North Korea and Iran. So it'll be interesting it'll be very interesting what comes out on December the 18th. I can tell you I'll be digging into that one in a big way.
All right, we've only got a couple of minutes left, Denise. I want to acknowledge our affiliates, and while I'm doing so, at 9:13 p.m. on December 12th, what are the polls saying in Alabama, if you don't mind taking a quick gander at them while I'm talking about
29% of the districts are in, and Moore is ahead, 51.6% versus 47.1%.
And we don't have any. I don't know the demographics of Alabama well enough to know whether or not we've got potential uncounted Democrat voting outweighing Republican voting. Do you know? I mean, is it saying anything about that?
I don't know. It's on mute, but I'm just kind of looking at the results at the bottom. Now we got 30% in with Roy Moore at 52% and Jones at 46.7. So essentially, there's Moore is 6 points ahead, 5.5 points ahead. Now, whether that holds true or not, the strength for Roy Moore is in the suburbs. It's not in the cities.
Well, that absolutely, as well as the rural community.
Right.
I mean, quite frankly, I really think that this may come down to a pro-life versus pro-choice vote.
Climate change.
And we're about to find out where Alabama
Planned Parenthood
stands on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Ladies and gentlemen, we need to acknowledge some really great radio networks and stations that believe in Denise and myself, along with all the other hosts on Talk America Radio. First of all, our digital flagship network is Talk America Radio. You can find a wealth of information at talkamericaradio.us. That's the main website. Ron Phillips is doing stellar work for that network. We've also got AM/FM radio stations that carry our shows, and they are invaluable to us. The listeners in these communities that listen on their car radios, we care deeply for you. We value you. Those radio stations are WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM that serves South Georgia, WJHC 107.5 FM that serves North Florida, and WLBB 1330 AM and 106.3 FM that serves both West Georgia and Eastern Alabama. Ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if Denise and I are sitting here giving you a 52-minute nonstop radio show with none of those unsightly commercial breaks, we don't have any sponsors for these shows. And that in itself should tell you why we do this. We do it for you, our valued listeners. We greatly appreciate the fact that you devote an hour or 52 minutes of your time to listen to our show. We take that very seriously, and we will never, ever, ever waste a minute of your time. Denise, why don't you say good night to everybody?
Good night, everybody.
Do it.
God bless America. Good night, everybody.